environment. With this, we take an agri-system approach towards looking at research and generating data and evidence that we'd like to see partners use for prioritizing their research, their innovation, their development work across the region. So my colleagues will provide an overview of the unique open access data set that we are releasing today from this work. Next slide, please. So the work that we do in transforming agri-food systems in South Asia is meant to tackle the key agri-food systems and climate challenges facing South Asia, with a goal at overcoming food and nutrition insecurity. South Asia has more than 1/4 of all humanity. It is the world's single most climate risk-prone region, with skyrocketing temperatures at this point in time specifically. It has the world's largest concentration of poverty and malnutrition. There are very serious resource access challenges and specifically management challenges related to the use of groundwater, as well as issues with air pollution. There are systematic and social inequalities that need to be addressed, and these are all sort of buttressed by key institutional and policy challenges. These challenges interact to confront agri-food systems and to essentially problematize the work that can be done towards developing more sustainable and appropriate agri-food systems in the region. If you can press the button, Aisha. So the way that we've approached this is to work at looking at each step of the agri-food system. And agri-food systems are often a complex concept that not everybody understands. They mean something different to everyone. But the way that we've conceptualized it in its most simple and I hope elegant form is to look at the interactions between food production and food availability, food access and affordability, and the consumption of food. And by doing so, you see how we look across production, markets, and consumption dynamics. Our team has also focused on the cross-cutting issues of climate change and social inclusion, as these affect each aspect of the agri-food system, with an ultimate goal of coordinating research and actions for development and impact across the production to consumption continuum. Next slide. Next slide. Great. Okay. So the way that we've organized this work is through 5 interactive, interlinked work packages that allow us to organize the research and stakeholder engagements that we have across the agri-food system. As I mentioned, our core work is on production, on markets, and on consumption. And you see that represented actually in our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th work packages that focus on those issues. But these issues need information. They need data, they need evidence. We need ground-based information to coordinate and ensure that the work that is done in those work packages responds to true on-the-ground needs and demand from our stakeholders and from data that indicates where we are to prioritize the research that is done and the ways in which we engage with our stakeholders. And that is actually the subject of today's presentation, which focuses on the outputs that came from our work package number 1, which is focused on inclusive multi-stakeholder learning platforms as we bring you together today, and public data systems. And the product of today's webinar is indeed the integrated agri-food system, public data system, and data set that we will be releasing. Last but certainly not least, we also work across these issues looking at building resilience to climate change and mitigating environmental degradation that also focuses on each aspect of the agri-food system, while strongly addressing issues related to gender and social inclusion across the agri-food system. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tim. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Avinash Kishore, who's a Senior Research Fellow in the Development Strategies and Governance Unit in IFPRI, South Asia Office. He will be talking about the importance of a local district agri-food systems assessment, and then he will be followed by a bunch of researchers from the TAFSSA team who will be presenting the findings from the various thematic areas that were captured in the agri-food systems. Over to you.
Thanks, Isha. So one thing that when we started TAFSSA, we realized when we did an evidence review is that a lot of discussion on food systems globally focus either on global level data and global level changes or national level at best. Even when a lot of levers of change or when governments target their policies and programs are at subnational level, even below province level in South Asia, which is a highly densely populated area. We realized that part of the reason that so much of the discussion on food systems and even analysis and engagement around it is at national or regional level is because of the lack of data. There's dearth of data at the subnational, sub-province level, and especially when it comes to disaggregated data, disaggregated by different members in the households, gender, and age groups. So that was our initial motivation to look at food systems at the lowest level where decisions are made, where targeting, the lowest level where targeting is used. Next slide, please. So what are our objectives for undertaking this exercise? So we wanted to collect data to understand how different parts of food system, as Tim showed in his slides, they interact, how each of these parts perform, key components of food system, and how do they interact with each other. We also realized that there aren't enough tools and modules available to collect this kind of data, especially when you care not just at aggregate level, but also at intra-household level and across different age groups, etc. So we thought that we would take up some of the modules that are out there and develop and polish some of the existing modules, adapt them to purpose. So our second objective was to develop methods and modules to collect this sort of data that everyone can use who is interested in such evidence. The third is to link data and analysis across the three big pillars of production, consumption, and markets, and do some interesting analysis that helps us understand how different parts of food systems come together, how do they interact with each other. Next, please. So one thing that when you start thinking about food systems, you quickly realize it can become overwhelming. Food is such a central part of who we are, what we do, and how do we interact with nature, our governance, etc. It can be overwhelming. So we realized that conceptual frameworks help. And what we did is we reviewed a whole range of conceptual frameworks that are out there for food systems, picked the HLP framework, and adapted it a little bit. Within that framework too, we had to make some difficult choices because collecting data on everything can become overwhelming. So we decided that for our case, we'll focus on what's there on the plate and link plate to farm. So diets became a central part, our focal point in the way we thought and we understood food systems. And accordingly, we looked at what's there on the people's plates, where does it come from, what's available in the markets, what's being locally produced, and over and above that, what's happening within households and how that affects what we eat, how we gather our food, how we purchase our food, how we cook and process it, and how do we dispose it. So the focus was that. One major choice that we made is a lot of food system study do look at health and economic outcomes too. We didn't measure height, weight, anthropometry, etc. deliberately to keep our survey manageable and to the extent possible short. Because there are other data available on health outcomes and even economic outcomes, to be focused more on diet, how food comes from, where it comes from, and how it is managed within the household. Next slide. So just to introduce you the main features of our primary survey, later Shumon will talk more about the data, is we used primary surveys and data were collected from three different units. There are household surveys done. We also collected some information from communities, especially to know more about the landscapes and institutions. And there was a lot of data collected from markets. The survey focused on rural areas only, but we have a representative sample of all rural households, not just the producing households. We also have a representative sample, and in some cases, even census of food outlets and food markets around the villages that came in our sample. Like I said earlier, we were very keen on collecting disaggregated data and understanding what happens within households. So we selected households that had each household, we interviewed a man, an adult man, wherever he was available, an adult woman, and we wanted to understand food system futures too. So we picked from a house listing only the household that had at least one boy or girl in the 10 to 19 years age group. And we interviewed them too about their roles, their aspirations, etc. Vendors in markets, shops, etc. We collected data from there. Altogether, the survey covered 3 countries, Bangladesh, India, and Nepal. In each, This is in a sense, a pilot for us. So we collected data from 2 districts in North Bangladesh, 2 districts in Nepal, and 1 district, Nalanda, in Bihar from India. So the next slide, you'll hear more about what we measured and what kind of data did we collect on diets, and just a showcase of some results. And similarly, we'll talk about the other 4 themes that Tim initially talked about. Over to you, Aisha. Thank you.
Thank you, Avinash. Now we'll go to the findings on diets, and these findings are presented in a video recorded format by Samuel Scott, who's a research fellow in IFPRI's Nutrition, Diets and Health Unit.
Good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Sam Scott. I'm a research fellow at IFPRI, and I will be starting out by presenting what's on the plate and how we measured diets, some of the tools that we used, and finally a couple slides on examples of findings so far. In terms of measuring consumption, we asked adult males, adult females, as well as adolescents about all foods they consumed in the previous 24 hours. So it was a 24-hour recall. We asked when they consumed the foods. So we asked what did they eat at pre-breakfast, breakfast, in the morning, at lunch, etc. And we were also interested in not just consumption yesterday, but consumption in the past week. So we included a food frequency questionnaire that asked about a set of 25 what we called sentinel foods. I will explain what that means in a couple slides. And we were interested not only in what they ate, but their perceptions about a set of foods. So things like how available or safe did they perceive different foods to be. And when we were designing the survey and thinking about how to measure diets, we were faced with a large number of decisions given how many different dietary assessment tools exist. We wanted to strike a balance between how long it takes to administer and the level of detail that the tool provides. So we were not so interested in how, the level of micronutrients that people consume, but we were interested very much in what foods people consume. And we ended up deciding to use the Global Diet Quality Score, or the GDQS. This was developed by a team called Intake at the Center for Dietary Assessment under FHI Solutions. And we liked that the GDQS had been validated so that the scores actually mean something in terms of correlation with health outcomes. We also liked that it only took about 15 to 20 minutes to administer. It captures all foods consumed in the previous 24 hours. And in the picture on the right, you can see there's a set of plastic cubes that they use to estimate how much they consumed, and this is done at the food group level. In addition to the 24-hour recall using the Global Diet Quality Score, we developed a list of 25 sentinel foods, shown here on the right in the yellow box. These include everything from grains, rice, wheat, maize, all the way to unhealthy foods at the bottom, and they represent multiple food groups. We used some of these to trace from plate to farm, and we featured them in different modules throughout the survey. So for example, we selected a set of 6 or 7 of these foods to ask about perceptions. So we asked about whether individuals know of a vendor or a shop who sells these healthy or unhealthy foods, or whether these are safe to eat, and the respondent had to either neither agree or disagree with these statements. Now that I've talked about what we measured and how we measured it, I wanted to show a couple examples of findings, and this is the first one. You'll see in this Sankey plot that on the left side are the 7 eating occasions that I mentioned: pre-breakfast, breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, afternoon dinner, and post-dinner. And on the right side are different food items that were consumed, and the streams show you which food items were consumed at what meal. So for breakfast, you can see that bhaji is consumed, vegetable curry is consumed, fish curry is consumed, khichdi is consumed. This is in Bangladesh for adolescents. And what this shows is that actually a set of around 4 or 5 foods is eaten consistently throughout the day at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. This slide shows the perceptions of foods by adolescents in Rajshahi, and you'll see that we asked about 5 healthy foods: dal, eggs, fish, green leafy veg, and banana. And we also asked about 2 unhealthy foods. So for dal, for example, 82% of adolescents agreed with the statement that there's a vendor nearby selling dal. And I wanted to point out 3 findings here. The first on fish. So you can see fish, 67% of adolescents knew of a vendor nearby, but fish is really perceived as safe, it's nutritious, families enjoy it. It's not as accessible or easy to acquire or affordable. Biscuits, on the other hand, are accessible, highly accessible. They are highly convenient and they are affordable. In terms of nutrition knowledge, looking at the second to last row, you'll see that the healthy foods are perceived to be nutritious, but the fried foods are not. And actually, 61% of adolescents think biscuits are nutritious.
That was Samuel Scott. Now I would like to hand over to Dr. Prakashan, who's an agricultural economist with International Rice Research Institute, and he'll be sharing the findings around markets. Over to you, Prakashan.
Thanks, Isha. So I'm really pleased to present about the market data, specifically on 2 distinct food environments this market data consists of. One is around the multi-vendor food market, and the other one is around village retail shops. Though not discussing in detail, we are studying how these food environments affect the local diets in South Asia. Next slide, please. As I highlighted, we are focusing on two food environments, the retail shops and multi-vendor markets. The multi-vendor markets consist of the hearts, roadside markets, village markets, city markets, etc. So these multi-vendor markets are characterized by a wide range of fresh foods, like the fruits, vegetables, fish, meats, etc., which are offering very rich nutritional choices to consumers. Whereas the village retail shop, that is an individual shop, generally offers a very limited selection of fresh foods, which are perishable, but their main focus is on packaged goods and household items. So to comprehensively evaluate these environments, we primarily collected data on different modules, different parameters, and briefly about that. One around market characteristics. This include, like, for example, the registration status of markets, the gender of vendors, and the like. So second, around the infrastructure, that's mainly around physical conditions of the markets, the shops, and whether they had permanent or semi-permanent or open structures, etc. And also the access to different types of facilities that include the coast, sewage systems, water connections, toilets, waste disposal places, etc. So we did also collect the data around the food items, what are available in the markets. We give a little bit more emphasis on the sentinel food, but we do have data on all other foods available in the in this market as well. So, next data is around the food sourcing, where the food is coming from, and are they locally produced or sourced from outside with the seasonality in consideration. We did also collect data around food spoilage, the quality and hygiene, as well as the food prices. So we recorded the price in the label if it is available. If no label, and if the prices are varying, we gathered the minimum, maximum, and median prices. So this is 2 sets of data now we talked. One is around the household data, and the data which I And now I talk about the market data. To connect these two data, we did have collect data at household level. That's using two modules like food shopping module and eating out of home data. Next slide, please. So we employed two approaches to collect data. The traditional interview based, mainly we interviewed the vendors of retail shops or the multi-vendor markets. Also, we did collect data where market managers are available, like the wholesale markets or mandis or hats. So and we did collect the interviews, the information around the sources of food, perceptions of vendors and consumers, the other availability of foods, etc. But in the observation base, mainly we looked at the physical conditions, the facilities, then the waste disposals, etc. around that, and also like the food prices wherever the labels are available. Next slide, please. So just give some examples of the findings. This slides, it's mainly about the shopping behavior from the household data. So to give you an example about the demographics of these shoppers in Rajshahi in Bangladesh, and that's the second row. The significant majority of shoppers are male, but when we look at the Bangay, the district in the Nepal, a larger proportion of shoppers are female. But the shopping preferences varies between different locations. For example, in Bangladesh, it's the main preference is towards the hearts, the local markets, whereas in India and Nepal, it is the retail shops. So with reference to the perceptions of food affordability across all the regions, the general perception is that healthy foods are expensive and not affordable for an average rural consumer. Next slide, please. So this slide talk about the market characteristics. So just give an example. In Nepal, majority of retail shop owners are female. But in Rajshahi, for example, in the middle row, we in the multi-vendor market, we didn't find even a single female vendor. But almost 70% of the vendors reported some degree of food spoilage, either specifically with with leafy vegetables and fruits. Next slide, please. This is my last slide about the finding. It's this data is from the Nalanda, India. There, we looked at the availability of different food items, like categorized based on the sentinel food, selected foods of the sentinel food items. We didn't include here the unhealthy food items. So we observed multi-vendor markets offering higher availability of healthy food items compared to retail shops. In retail shops, a higher availability of non-perishable products like masoor dal, onions, and potatoes are observed here. So the availability of food in a rural market depends on the local production of diversified foods. I think my colleague Alison will speak about this next.
Thank you, Prakashan. I would just like to introduce Alison, who's an agroecologist specialist with CIMMYT and is the lead for CISA India. She will be presenting the findings related to production. Over to you, Alison.
Thanks, Isha and Prakashan. Yes, so this is very much an introductory snapshot across the districts that we've surveyed in South Asia. And I really encourage everyone who's interested to explore the data for more detail, not just in production, although of course that is fascinating, but across all of these areas. So if we could go forward, please, Isha. Thank you. So we've measured at the household level. We looked at land ownership and usage. Primarily, we focused on on-farm activities and particularly on-farm production activities across all categories. So different categories of livestock, including fish, pigs, and poultry, where they were present, and crops, orchard crops, homestead crops, all sorts of productivity. We asked households about their perceptions of production constraints and challenges. And we also asked households about how their farm produce was used across the farm. And if we could go forward, please. Thank you. So we looked very much, we dug down into land ownership, how much land in households that the households were using was owned, how much was rented, and categorized that by both men and women, male and female ownership. We looked at the types of land in terms of crop, homestead, or orchard land, and then tried to understand the usage that that land was put to each season. So the rabi season or the dry season, the summer season, and then the kharif or monsoon season. We looked at the crops grown, as I said. We looked at the different types of poultry, the livestock cultivated. We do ask some questions about labour and mechanisation and input and irrigation inputs, particularly chemical inputs and irrigation access. And this was to try and help us better understand the farmers' or the households' perceptions of the challenges that they were facing in terms of their agricultural productivity. If we could go forward, please. Thank you. So I'm going to show you, I'm talking about production in terms of two contrasts. The first one is the similarities that we observed across the 5 districts. On the next slide, I'll show you some of the differences, the high-level differences. So across all of the 5 districts, we found that average land holdings were small. So for about half the number of households, they had some land, or between 0 and half a hectare of land. The next largest group of households was the households who had no land. And then a smaller percentage of households in each category had more than half a hectare of land, and these were categorized as larger households. By far, the majority of households that were surveyed in each district were involved in agriculture. And for each household, the key crops were cereals. So rice and wheat in particular, and in some districts, maize, and there was a little bit of potato as well. Secondary crops that were of key importance were legumes and oilseeds. And primarily these crops were grown for home consumption, although there was some selling in some districts. And I'll get onto that a little bit in the next slide. Again, with livestock, the majority of households produce small ruminants, primarily for milk and for meat. And then cattle or buffalo were also cultivated, again, for milk purposes. Most households in most districts cultivated some poultry, again, usually for eggs, but there was some meat consumption as well. And if we could go forward, please, Isha. Thank you. So the differences, there were some differences here between Bangladesh and Nepal and India. So trends were more common across Nepal and India than they were in Bangladesh. So in Nepal and India, very few of the households we surveyed grew cash crops, whereas in Bangladesh, up to about half of the households in each district surveyed grew cash crops. And these were largely jute, sugarcane, and betel nut. So often crops that have a fairly high water requirements. Possibly reflecting these changes, in Bangladesh, the majority of households sold these differences, sorry. The majority of households in Bangladesh sell some of their farm produce and specifically choose the crops that they grow to sell some of those produce. Whereas in Nepal and India, very few of the households relatively sell farm produce, and most of the produce the food that is produced on farm is used within the farming household. We also observed higher crop diversity in Nepal and India, particularly in the rabi season, where over 60% of households grow 3 or more crops in the rabi season. And we observed that households with more land had higher crop diversity, and it's likely that they have easier access to irrigation as well to be able to farm a larger area of land in the rabi season. In contrast, in Bangladesh, crop diversity was relatively low, with up to 80% of households growing one crop in both the kharif and the rabi seasons. And now I will hand over to Isha and my colleague Neha at IFPRI.
Good afternoon. I'm Neha Kumar. I'm a senior research fellow at IFPRI, and I will be describing some of the gender dimensions that we were able to capture in the survey, how these were measured, and show some examples of our findings. We captured different aspects of women's agency by measuring perceptions of time poverty, autonomy in decision-making around matters related to health and health-related expenditures, children's schooling and marriage, agricultural decisions, and decisions around food purchases and preparation. We also measure agency around mobility, financial independence, and family support. And lastly, we measure attitudes towards intimate partner violence. And since we were trying to assess the local food system, it would have been incomplete if we didn't delve into some of the gender dynamics around who does what within the household. So we capture how household tasks ranging from agricultural tasks all the way to taking care of young children, how these tasks are allocated across household members. So how do we measure this? We use direct survey questions to the female respondent using standard modules that have been tested in the South Asian context before to measure different aspects of agency among women. For measuring how tasks are allocated across the household members, we developed a new tool based on field visits in the 3 countries that were surveyed and in consultation with collaborators, which revealed the importance of task sharing among female household members and the importance of going beyond the dichotomy of men and women and how tasks are shared across the household. So let me give a little bit more detail on how we capture this. So we measure 44 tasks that are spread across agricultural tasks, food preparation related tasks, and household care and maintenance related tasks. And for each task, the respondent identified which household member is primarily responsible for doing the task. So they could identify up to 2 household members that shared the task equally, or they could say one individual household member that was taking care of the task. They could also identify if the task was performed by hired help. The response was linked to the roster, which means that for each task, we know exactly who within the household is performing the task. So whether it's performed by a man or a woman, individually or shared, and the age of the person performing it. So by the end of administering this module, which takes about 5 minutes to administer, we get a very rich data set, which can be manipulated in different ways to produce very interesting analysis and graphs. So I'll present some of these findings now, but also encourage you to look at our data notes, which shows the different ways in which this data can be used, even for descriptive analysis. This figure takes data from Rangpur district in Bangladesh, and it's showing information on the 19 tasks, agriculture related tasks, and each bar gives the breakup of how these tasks are divided. So the light blue colored portion indicates hired help, the yellow portion indicates the amount, the percentage that's done by male members alone, the purple portion represents equally shared among men and women, and the blue portion represents tasks that are done primarily individually by women. And we find that men are more involved in tasks that are performed at the field or are related to the market, while women are taking care of livestock. And men and women are both involved, are sharing tasks around post-harvest storage and processing. This figure takes the same data that was presented in the previous graph, but presents a different dimension. It looks at the age of the individual performing the tasks and breaks it up into adult men, adult women, and adolescents. And we find that agricultural tasks are primarily performed by adult household members, but at the same time, adolescents are chipping in around some of these tasks, especially related to taking care of livestock. So these are just some very small snapshots of what you can do. Please do look at our data notes. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Neha Kumar, who's a Senior Research Fellow in the Nutrition, Diets and Health Unit at IFPRI. And now to present the last set of findings on climate, I request Shreya Chakrabarti, who's a researcher, climate change policy and adaptations at International Water Management Institute. Over to you, Shreya.
Thanks, Esha. So in terms of looking at the really cross-sectoral aspects that affect the entire agri-food system, we looked at climate change. Isha, can you move on to the next slide? Right, so let's look at firstly what we measured. So we did not look at climate change from just not from its physical characteristics in terms of the precipitation, temperature calculations. What we looked at, because this was a part of the household survey, we wanted to look at perceptions, wanted to look at the experience, how they felt impacted, in what way, and how did they cope with it, or what were their responses. In addition, because of the wide scope of this data set, we wanted to measure the different domains of resources and assets that a household possesses that builds adaptive capacity of households to climate change. And finally, we looked at access to climate information services. So these were the main thematic areas that were measured. Next, Isha. So in terms of how it was measured, so first we went about trying to identify what major climate shocks in the past 2 years through a recall households faced. And based on that, we tried to identify which top 3 shocks were actually perceived by households as having affected them the most. And based on that, we asked them specific questions around the kind of impacts that they faced and the kind of responses that they had to those impacts. But what was interesting about this aspect was that when we looked at the impacts and the responses, we covered the entire agri-food sector and the system in terms of the kinds of impacts and responses that we looked at. So we looked at not just the farm level crop production aspects, but also in terms of resources in agriculture infrastructure, household infrastructure, market access, income and livelihoods, and consumption. For climate information services, we had direct questions, but we broke it down into number 1 is access to weather information. Then we wanted to know more about whether it's not just sufficient to have weather information, but whether they also receive technical advisory based on this information and what the sources for this information of the households are. Next, Aisha. So the most important part of this analysis was that based on the kind of impacts and responses that we had, we also wanted to see what kind of capitals and resources do households actually possess, which allows them to build enough adaptive capacity to cope with the climate shocks that they face. In this regard, we looked at sort of a more conceptual framework, which comes from the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework from the 5 capitals. So we looked at human capital, social capital, physical capital, natural and financial capital. So each of these capitals contributes some aspect to the coping mechanisms of the households and whether they're able to adapt and whether they're able to find responses to immediate shocks and build resilience. Next. So based on looking at a lot of literature, we tried to identify what were the key domains and indicators that actually come under different capitals, and we identified each of these. But what was a huge value addition from this particular survey was because the survey actually had questions and modules from the entire agri-food system, that we were able to actually find enough indicators for all of these capitals, which is rather rare in other level data sets, to find data from across all of these different indicators and domains, to therefore then allow us to have some kind of an adaptive capacity index. While we have not yet calculated the index yet for the initial data analysis, we have assessed each of these separately to give us an idea about what are these different resources where in a particular region households genuinely lack and could contribute to reduced adaptive capacity, and which are sort of opportunities for different regions that one could build on to improve adaptive capacity for these regions. Next. So I'm just going to provide an example. We have a lot more findings, but as Neha mentioned, I would urge you all to look at the data notes that are already published online from this work. It has a really rich set of initial data analysis. But I just want to present an example that is able to showcase sort of the value of this kind of more household level perceptive approach to climate change research and how we analyzed it. So this is something that we did that based on our queries to the households in terms of the kind of impacts that they faced. We found that the impacts that they face are really across the entire system. However, and for different shocks, these impacts are different. So we were able to map these out. So we found that the most frequently reported shocks, for instance, this is just an example of Nalanda, were cropping related impacts. and market livelihood consumption related impacts are also cited. So for say untimely rainfall, say for one particular shock, market livelihood and consumption were bigger impacts compared to others. So we were able to disaggregate it according to the different kinds of shocks. Next. Now, in alignment with this, we also looked at the response strategies. However, what we found here was that despite the crop-related impacts being the most dominant source of impact, the most common responses were not agronomic responses. They were actually more short-term urgent relief responses that were used by households, including reliance on credit or remittances and dependence on government rations, for instance, which provided them shorter-term coping mechanisms rather than longer-term changes in practices. So I think just to give an example of why some of the value that we value addition that came from just these two examples was that it showed that firstly that impact areas from climate change do not always correlate with the same sectoral response category of the responses, which means that people do not. So if the problem is water, the response is not always necessarily with water. The dependence on short-term immediate relief instead of long-term changes in practices is prevalent across all the regions that we saw. In Nalanda, we particularly found the importance of social safety nets, which are more accessed in India and really offer enormous amount of coping capacity to households, and therefore the importance of looking at this intersection between climate adaptation and social safety nets and development policies. Then we also find that impacts and responses come from across the agri-food sector, which allows us to, which really pushes us to look at this whole issue as a systems issue and not just a particular sector, which is something that really brings a lot of value to the importance of a survey of this kind, which is across the whole system, the agri-food system. And because this data set allowed us such a wide scope of as components of the system, we were able to actually find a whole lot of indicators and variables that allow us to build an adaptive capacity index for the households. Thanks. So I will now hand it over to, I think Suman will take on the next section.
Thank you, Shreya. I'm inviting Shuman Chakrabarti, who's a Associate Research Fellow in the Nutrition, Diets and Health unit in IFPRI, and he will be sharing and talking about the open access data set and how you can access that data set. Over to you, Shuman.
Thanks, Isha. Can we change the slide, please? Hello, everyone. We've made the data sets from our household survey freely accessible to all. And the data sets can be downloaded directly from the Harvard Dataverse. The link for the Harvard Dataverse is provided here on the slide, but you can just simply Google it as well. And then once you land on the main page, you just need to type in TAFSSA, that's TAFSSA, and press the search button. And once you press that, then on the right-hand side, you see this screen that I've taken a screenshot of, and it has about 12 data sets uploaded. And that's 12 data sets across, so that's 3 countries and 4 data sets for the 3 countries. And the 4 data sets include the female data set, the male data set, the adolescent data set, and the community data set. Next slide. So so when you land on the page for the individual data sets, you'll see that the questionnaire can be downloaded directly from there as well. And so this is what the female questionnaire will give you. It has general household identification and demographic composition. And then it has the GDQS files, which I'll talk about in detail just in a little bit. It has food frequency questionnaires, food sources, drivers of food choice, exposure to ads, household food insecurity experiences, water insecurity experiences, home food observations. And then it has a really cool module on shopping habits and preferences, which includes food shopping practices, food aspirations, and consumption of paid meals outside the home. And then it has a gender module, which includes household tasks, leisure perceptions, and empowerment. Next slide, please. For the male questionnaire, so we relied on males to answer some. So for one, we also interviewed males for GDQS and most of the food questions, as well as for drivers of food choice and exposure and shopping practices where the male was responsible for doing the shopping. But apart from that, males were responsible for answering questions around agricultural production, sales, and futures, and then household asset ownership, access to amenities, social safety net programs, and membership of organizations and migration. So, and of course, access to credit. So those are all household level modules which were answered by males, and you can get them from the mail files. For adolescents, apart from the GDQS, the food frequency questionnaire, drivers of food choice and exposure, which was also asked for males and females, we asked 2 additional modules, one on school attendance, which gives you some details about schooling, sometimes questions on whether they got meals at school, etc. And then on their aspirations on what they want to do when they grow up and whether those aspirations agree with what their parents want them to do and, so on. The next one. And the final questionnaire is the community questionnaire, which is basically gives you community level data on just, for example, what the PSU composition is, what the typical wage rates are, what the machine rental costs are, what the infrastructure looks like, and groundwater land use. So this is also a useful instrument. You can merge this with all the household level data using the PSU ID. And you can, if you want to run like analyses, controlling for village level characteristics, this will allow you to do that as well. Next slide. So these are sample sizes for the merged data sets. That's when we've merged all of the modules together. So in Bangladesh, for Rajshahi and Rangpur, we have 4,655 individuals. For Nalanda, we have 2,634 individuals. For Nepal, Banki and Surkhet, we have 2,413 individuals. The breakup of male, females, and adolescents is also given in this table. For a total of about close to 1,992 households in Bangladesh, 1,000 households in Nalanda, 3,009. Sorry, I think I must have flipped the households for Nepal and Bangladesh there. So it's actually 3,992 for Bangladesh households, 1,992 for India, and then 1,000 for Nepal. Next slide. So the GDQS data, so since we used a different application to collect the GDQS data, just wanted to give you a snapshot of what that app looks like. So as you interview people, it takes you through the different eating occasions of the day and what they have eaten on that particular day. So this is kind of the interface of the app. And what you get in terms of data is on the next slide. So here, this shows you the kind of data that you get, and this will be uploaded for males, females, and adolescents. So you get files like the respondent file, the meals file, the food file, the ingredients file, and the classifications file. The respondent file will identify who the respondent was. The meals file will tell you which of the meals out of the 7 eating occasions that we had, which was pre-breakfast, breakfast, pre-lunch, lunch, snack, before dinner, dinner, and then post-dinner. So those were the eating occasions. And then the foods file tells you which foods they were eaten at each of these meals. The ingredients file will tell you what were the ingredients that went into these foods. And the classifications file will tell you how the foods correspond with the GDQS classification. So there's a whole lot of rich information in the GDQS data files, and all of them can be linked with the household data using a unique ID. So you can find more details on the blog that we've published. Isha will link the blog in chat, I believe, during this call. And you can find details of links to the individual data sets as well in the blog itself. And then finally, I'd just like to say that the market survey is also coming later this year. So we're planning to make that open access as well. That's going to include market census for Rajshahi, Rangpur, and Nalanda. Market surveys for all 5 districts, retail service for all 5 districts, and these can be linked directly to the household level data using the PSU ID. It will have data files which include, this is not the complete list, but products sold, prices, types of vendors, marketing, food sourcing, and supply chains. That's all for me. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So altogether, we are really excited as this whole team, including our national partners who work very hard to collect this data, collate it, and organize it to share this data with all of you. It's a new experience for us. We haven't published any papers using this data. There are several manuscripts that are in progress. In addition, what we have done is we have also published some thematic for each of the 5 districts. We have produced a series of thematic briefs that just give you a descriptive sense, descriptive results on some of the key indicators that my colleagues just show. You can go and take a look at them to get a sense, and maybe that can be used to generate new hypotheses and the crosstabs and regressions you want to run. As a team, we really want you to use this data, collaborate with us and among yourselves to analyze this data and generate more evidence on local food systems. Isha, would you click on the link to just show what these briefs look like? They're just a guide to some interesting results that have come up, but a lot more analysis can be done. You are welcome to work with us among yourselves and spread the word to other people who may not have joined this call about the availability of data. Over the next few years, we would like to do more of these surveys and collaborate with people in similar such efforts. If you are interested, please do reach out to us. I want to add one more thing, that the TAFSSA team is organizing a learning lab in ANH Academy in June. We'll soon spread the word about it, where we'll introduce some of the new tools we used and validated in our experience with a wider group of people. It's an online webinar, it's costless. Please do join if you're interested in any of these tools that we talked about, and share your views. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Avinash. I just want to let everybody know that the link to this blog is in your chat box, which you can copy and save or bookmark. In the blog, you will see the details about the agri-food system assessment. When you go down, you will see the data set links. So for each of our locations, for Bangladesh, Rajshahi and Rangpur, for India, Nalanda, and for Nepal, Surkhet and Bake, we have the links to the data set segregated by male, female, adolescent, and community. So you can access the data set here. And if you go further down, you can access the data notes that Avinash just talked about, Shumon and Avinash just talked about. And these data notes, these are 9 data notes. So each district has 9 data notes. And if you look at the theme and then whichever district you want to download, you can just click here and download the data note. I'll just show you an example. So if you want the agriculture production and use data note for Rangpur, Bangladesh, once you click here, it'll directly take you to the PDF page.
Isha, we don't see it. We don't see that on the screen. We only see the slides on the screen.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry. Let me just quickly share it again. Yes. So now can you share, see the screen, Purnama?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the blog, the link that has been shared in the chat box. You can access the data set, male, female, adolescent community for all the 3 countries here. And when you go further down, you can click on any of you can look at any of the theme and click on whichever district you want to look at the data note for. And once you click on the data note, you get the PDF downloadable file. So that's how you can download all the data notes for one district. Okay, so thank you, Avinash. Now we have some time for question and answers. Actually, we are running a little bit behind, but just 2 minutes behind. So I know a lot of questions have been answered by Avinash, Shumon, and all other researchers in the chat box itself. And I see 2 hands up already. So I'm going to just unmute the people who have their raised hands, and then you can ask your question. So Shujit, please go ahead. Shujit, you are muted. Please unmute yourself. Okay. I think let Shujit figure out. Until then, any other questions, Avinash and others? You are looking at the questions in the Q&A box. Any question that you want to take up live?
So there are a lot of questions about collaboration. A couple of people at least have expressed interest in collaborating and are asking questions whether they can access data. Yes, you can. If you go through the slides or the links that are posted, the data are there for everyone. You can download the data and use it the way you want to. For collaboration, Isha will share an email address. If you're interested in what is it that you want to work on or work with us, you can write that email address and one of us will respond to you and explore next steps to collaboration using this data set. So you're all very welcome to collaborate with us. You may use it independently too. There are no restrictions. You don't have to necessarily come to us to analyze this data and publish research papers or other credible outputs using it. If you're using this data or publishing something, we'd request you to share those outputs with us because we can help you advertise it more widely and bring more evidence to the table regarding food system. The main goal of this activity is to generate more evidence around food system decisions, food system policies and investments. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Avinash. We have one participant, Sikandar Tanveer, who has his hand up. Sikandar.
Hello.
Yes.
And you listen to me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I am Dr. Sikandar Tanveer from SARC Agriculture Center, Dhaka. And sorry, I joined a little bit late. But what are the conclusions, few points, just data collection and the few districts from Bangladesh, few from India and Nepal? Are the conclusion in few points? Can you please tell us? Hello?
Yes,
Yes,
sure. I am going to make a valiant effort to answer that question. This is a very rich data set, and there are a lot of new and interesting findings, plus validation of some of what we already have a good sense of. So, for example, one of the findings, which I guess some of you already have a sense of, is that our production is not all that diverse, especially when it comes to field crops. We are mostly cereal-focused systems with some production of other things. A second interesting point, I'm covering different themes, is no matter how small a farmer, very high proportion of farmers in South Asia participate in markets as sellers and as buyers of food. A third finding is if you're looking at what's on the plate, a whole lot of it, a lion's share of it, even for producing households, comes from markets and nearby markets. So markets, what's there in the nearby outlets, etc., are a huge determinant. They have a huge influence on what we eat. They are just 3 examples. There are many, many more findings. Some of those were shared, but yeah. And I would encourage you to go through these district briefs to get more about different aspects of food systems across these 5 districts. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Let me say partially answered the question. Yeah.
Yeah. There's another question. I think this is for Prakashan. What proportion of vegetables consumed by households were produced versus bought in the market? Prakashan, are you there? Anybody else would like to? Okay.
Sorry. Actually, I don't remember that in my head. How that the proportion. I will cross check and then.
Okay. Yeah. I think you will also find this information if you look at the data notes. So request you to kindly look at the data notes. The link is there in the chat box. There is another question by Mohammed Jamal Hussain, which is, I think, to Shreya. What are the risks and recommendations of climate change for health and nutrition of mothers and children in Bangladesh? Shreya, would you like to answer this question live?
I was just typing out the answer to that question right now. So, so in just our initial data, we have already found that there are a lot of households who, shift their food dependency on government rations, and in places where such food entitlements are not available in the form of social safety net policies, there are also households that actually go into reducing consumption of food in the household in response to severe shocks. So while we haven't assessed this across, we haven't done a gendered analysis for this, we have found that in many households, this kind of sort of rationing of food consumption is actually happening. And we would expect. So we will try, now that we are going to go more and more into analysis, we are going to try and see how climate adaptation and gender context of the households overlap. And hopefully we'll have more of an answer for your question as we start working on the paper for this.
Thank you.
I
Thank you,
hope that
Shreya.
answers something. Yeah.
Thank you, Shreya. We have 2 hands up, and I think after this we'll go to the panel because we are a little out of time. So first, Srijit, I think your mic is working now, and then Satish Kumar.
Yeah. Thank you, Shreya. I was wondering whether there is also data that can be analyzed in terms of emission from different production systems that will lead to consumption of households. What are the different pathways, consumption pathways that will be have less emission footprint? So I see this presentation from Shreya on climate, and
Yes.
it was more on sustainable livelihood framework and looking at the different capitals. So I was also wondering from the point of view of carbon emissions. So is I haven't had a chance to look at the data still. I was wondering whether there is such kind of data being collected or available. Thank you.
So we haven't focused on emissions data in this particular, although the production brief does have a lot of these variables through which you can calculate emissions. But one of the reasons why we did not take emissions here was we've actually found quite a bit of secondary data available in South Asia, and we are also doing that as another analysis where we are actually calculating GHG footprints from available government plot level secondary data. Which is, for instance, in India, you can get it from the CACP data sets. So there, where you actually get not just the production details, but also all of the practices that are involved in production, which contributes to different levels of emissions. So that's one of the reasons why we did not have the mitigation data sets within this, although the production modules here do have a lot of the base variables that you will require to calculate emission factors for at the household level. But since secondary data is already available in South Asia from different departments, which we are already trying to analyze in a different activity, and hopefully we will have an output on that out also soon. We have tried to focus more on the adaptation part in this.
Thank you, Shreya.
Thank you, Shreya. Thank you, Srijit. I think we'll just go for the last question. If Satish Kumar has a question, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yes, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Please introduce yourself and then ask the question.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Satish Kumar from the Council on Energy and Infrastructure. Thanks for such a wonderful presentation. This is a pretty extensive effort. My question is more related to the production side. I think there were 2 facts that was very interesting, right? So first is, I think in Bihar especially, we saw that I think the number of farmers who were selling their produce was very less. I think it was probably around 1/3 or something, if I recall from the presentation. Then I think that would mean a lot of subsistence farming. Plus also in another slide, I saw a lot of reliance on ration, right? So for me, these 2 charts kind of seem opposite to each other, given that most households also do mostly cereal cultivation and not others, right? So, if there is dependence on ration, but also the household is growing a lot of cereals and not actually selling the cereals. So I'm just trying to marry these 2 facts and see what exactly the scenario is with respect to cereal consumption. That is my question.
Satish, I can take the question. I am from Bihar, as that also helps. We have data on source-wise consumption of cereals, and in one of the answers I responded, cereals are one thing where households do depend a lot on their home production. So Bihar, I think the numbers are close to 60 to 70% of the consumption of rice and wheat, when I say those 2, is coming from home production, and PDS share is around 20% or something like that. I may be a little bit off on exact numbers. What extent do they sell? Again, I do not remember the numbers, but remember the yield are modest. So Nalanda is South Bihar, somewhat better, and holdings are very small. So I won't be surprised if there isn't a lot of cereals that is sold there, because the total produce per household is not all that much. But we can take a closer look at the data and get back to you. Or you can take a look at the data too. You have access to it too. Either way, we have those numbers in the district brief on production. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Avinash. And looking at the time, there are a few more questions in the chat box, but we assure you that our researchers will answer the questions while we are doing the panel discussions. They will answer your questions in the chat box. And if you have any other questions, in the chat box, I've added the email address where you can reach out to us and ask your questions regarding the data sets or the data notes. As I invite Dr. Purnima Menon, who will be moderating the panel discussion, I would like, in the meantime, as I said, I would like all the researchers to kindly look at the questions in the chat box and answer as many as you can. So now inviting Dr. Purnima Menon, who's a Senior Director for Food and Nutrition, where she oversees 3 units within IFPRI and CGIAR, working on nutrition, diets and health, poverty, gender and inclusion, and markets, trade and institution. Over to you, Purnima, to moderate the panel discussion on how can open access data sets benefit users in the agri-food systems.
Great. Thank you, Isha. Can I just invite all our panelists on camera as well? Excellent. Just want to welcome all of you. So first, Dr. Zahidul Hassan, who I'm just going to call Zihad Bhai, from Bangladesh. His journey in the survey market really started in 1991 as an enumerator for IFPRI. Since then, he's founded a firm called Data Analysis and Technical Assistance in Bangladesh, has been a key partner of IFPRI and many other development agencies in Bangladesh, undertaking numerous development-oriented surveys. I understand, Zihad Bhai, that you and your team have completed nearly 200 large-scale surveys since then. It's been a privilege to work with you on at least a few of those. Our other panelist is Dr. Sabrina Rashid, who's a scientist at the International Center for Diarrheal Diseases Research, ICTDRB in Bangladesh. Dr. Rashid has been walking this journey with the TAFSSA team as well in terms of designing and thinking through some of the integrated food system survey. And she has extensive research on maternal and child nutrition, health systems, urban health, as well as health and climate change. Nutrition being really central to all of those. Welcome, Sabrina. Great to have you here. Last but not least, Dr. Aruna Palke, who's an agricultural economist with more than 15 years of experience in Nepal's agriculture. She works as a project team leader at IIDS in Nepal and also does collaborate with IFPRI. So really a great pleasure to have all 3 of you here. Please, do stay on camera if you can. Let me first just ask you for a couple of minutes of reflection. What did you take away from at least the few brief findings that you saw here? Really looking across the food system. So Aruna, let me start with you first, and then Sabrina and Zihad, I'll come to you right after that.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. After hearing this presentation, there's a huge amount of data from different countries, India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. So for all the researchers and also the policymakers or anyone who is interested to further look, look into the agri-food system, we can do this analysis of this data and grab some information and advise the policymakers in this from these data. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sabrina, any key reflections from your side on what you saw? Maybe focusing on the nutrition data would be great, but anything else would be fine too.
Yeah, it's the fun thing about the data set is that it's a very granular data, and it is covering a huge sort of from production to markets to consumption. So, it's amazing that this has been collected, and it'd be really interesting to see the links now. I was quite interested in seeing that in Bangladesh, 20 to 55% of farmers are growing cash crops, and that 70% of all their growing are being sold. So, and of course, that has an impact on crop diversity, which is now low because, they're focusing on cash crops and they're obviously selling everything that they are producing, a huge amount of it. And then they're becoming totally dependent on markets. So then the market module becomes really interesting and how it sort of shapes how people change things. And of course, there's this really interesting group, the adolescents, what they're doing, what we are looking into for the future of our, agriculture system, and how things are going to happen. We might get a window into the future by looking at what the practices and perceptions of the adolescents. I'm really excited to see what comes out of that.
Great, thank you, Sabrina. Great. Zihad Bhai, any sort of opening reflections from you?
Yeah, I was listening. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. I was listening through this whole presentations. It's really overwhelming. To me, the thing is generally people talks about Bangladesh or Nepal or India as a country from the local perspective when you are doing works from the global aspects. But this actually unveils the story of very local things. Let's say Rajshahi and Rangpur. You know, it's not reflecting Bangladesh, but it's reflecting what's happening in Rangpur and Rajshahi or Nalanda or in other aspects. And yeah, I can see how the numbers we have collected unveils the local stories. For example, Rangpur and Rajshahi are very different than the rest of the country in terms of they have the orchard agriculture and also the tobacco agriculture, very predominant. That's one thing. The other thing is thinking about, let's say, the time use of the male and female, and also the use of time in agriculture perspective. It came to me that more of the foundation work land preparation, farming are done by males, then the processing of the produce is done by female, and then again male is taking to the things to the market when you are segregating the task and other things. It gives me otherwise thinking that whether we expand, we can use we can differentiate the roles or use the female resources, time resources in other parts of the agriculture production, and males parts also, something like that. The other thing is some of the challenges also found that when Avinash was taking that the researcher has to think about many of the dietary intake or food frequency modules to come up with the simple and easy to implement things. So they found the GDQs and other things. So it's really it's so many information in this in this survey that same time throws challenges to collect and also to understand, and at the same time it also offers the opportunity to make it more easier, more available, so that people can use this information and do things as the things. The challenges are opportunities to me. All the challenges actually gives me the opportunity to expand and grow. So that is what I'm taking from this part. I can talk later more on the other things. So that's what the initial.
I actually, that's why don't we just stay with you, and then I'll go back to the, to Sabrina and then to Aruna. I think you made a very good point about how the data and the picture that we have here, opens and shares both some opportunities and challenges for food systems transformation or actions at a local level. And so I'm just wondering, you've had a lot of experience with sort of collecting data, but also seeing how that data is used by different people to make decisions. And so, that's a question for all three panelists. Could you maybe say a little bit about, what have you seen in that use of data that, we can think will be helpful? What more can we do as a team what can the wider range of collaborators here who might use the data to really take this forward to support people to undertake different actions. Any reflections on that whole data to action, or not quite policy, we're talking about local actions here, but would be great to have some quick reflections on that.
Let me elaborate my things at the start, and then I can stop within short time. The thing is, let's say, for example, what I said right at the moment, that let's say the Rangpur region and the Rajshahi region, the two districts, are more of a orchard agriculture and of tobacco agriculture. So talking about food systems, starting from the farming, producing to consuming. So policymakers can think whether, I mean, the northern region is really, they adopted the modern agriculture, machineries and other things. So whether we can use our producer resources, farmers or the land, to have more diversified productions that could support whole Bangladesh as well as the Rajshahi and the Rangpur community. So that's one thing. So the transformation in both ways, I mean, in production ways, in technological use ways, and access to data ways, that could be one thing. Regarding the experience we saw in our government, I mean, you may find it in different country in different ways, but recently, very recently, I mean, let's say last 10 to 15 years, we are seeing that our government is very prone to database evidence to make policies. For an example, let's say if you see that we did a survey, I mean, also with IPRI, that we call it Angel Agriculture, Gender, Nutrition. So government is scaling up. We started in 16 district, 16 upazilas to see how the production are impacted by different training and different interventions. And government is scaling up now in Bangladesh. That's one thing. The other was Transfer Modality Research Initiative is about safety net programs. So government is also suggesting in all safety net programs to implement, to take those sort of things. So these sort of agriculture transformation data, if it's open to all, the access is open to all, it can be impacted not only government, also of course the producers, the consumers, at the same time the retailers, throughout the value chain. So it's when it's accessible to all, it gives you opportunity to use what existing, what happenings there, to know, also to identify the gaps. So it makes the society a collaborative society rather than competitive society. When your data is hidden, when you only use your data, then the other researchers are competing with the agencies. When your data is open, it gives you the interaction impact. Particularly, for example, so we know these data are available, so how far we need to go, or how we can fill up the gaps. So it makes the society collaborative in many ways. So through collaboration, you really takes the whole society ahead. Through competition, you put yourself in ahead. I mean, competition is kind of selfish society. So that's
Thank you for saying that.
in this way in short time. But yeah, I can talk more about other things, but let's stop now because the other panelists are here. So
great. So Aruna, what are your reflections on how the data here can inform action, and what have you learned from your work over there?
Thank you so much. Obviously, the data is a source of evidence for all of us, like for the policymaker and for us researchers like us. So it speaks a lot about the reality. And when you say about like this data that we just saw, the agri-food data on production and marketing, and also the spatial, it is like very diverse and very disaggregated data. So that helps very much to make the decision, I mean the planning at the local level, very much. It helps the local government as well as for the for at the national level as well. So these data and if it has open access, like we don't like we as just Dr. Hassan says, like if it's open, that we don't need to all of us don't need to make extra effort for collecting the data again and again, because data is already there, right? So we just need to collect what is lagging, and then we can save our effort, we can save our financial burden as well, because when we collect these kind of a data, one of the problem is a lack of resources, because the data is very disaggregated and we have to collect at the very local level, so it needs lots of financial support. So that can also be reduced, and also support the policymaker and organization that like us, who have been working in this field. So it's very 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 good, and also obviously the synergy and the collaborative effect that can be learned from India, from Nepal, and Bangladesh. So
thank you. Great. So Sabrina, what are your reflections on this?
I'm a researcher, so I'm kind of I have a bias, right? Data is always good, but in my experience, policymakers don't have a lot of time to analyze data. So even if you make the data available, it's going to be hard for them to analyze and come up with something that they can use. So I would suggest that there are some key visuals or something that allows people to quickly look at key findings, like the demographic and health survey data allows, so people can just put different things and into a sort of a box and see the interactions between something or the other, and in terms of a figure. So those kind of efforts may be called for policymakers to be able to use the data set easily. So that's one thing. The other thing is, maybe some key things that the researchers see from the data set can be summarized in a policy brief kind of thing, so that people can have a quick access to what's going on and from the data sets and sort of reflect on it. So, just to ease the government and the policymakers' use of the data sets.
Yeah, thanks. So, yeah, definitely need quite a bit of translation there, and the briefs that Avinash mentioned, I think are a first attempt, but we'll definitely have to do more. I know we'll have to close soon, so maybe can I just ask each of you for just a 1 minute closing thought, any or a research idea that you may have for the team or for yourselves to pursue from these data sets. Really any closing thoughts would be fantastic. So Sabrina, let's just stay with you, and then I'll go back through the group. Sort of a final thought.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the market. As I said, I am really excited to see how the agriculture and the market interacts, and all the things we researchers and nutrition researchers have been doing to promote healthy foods in the households. And we have not taken into account the agriculture aspects of it and market aspects of it. Really trying to understand that part would help what we do in the future. And especially I'm interested in the practices of the adolescents and where things are going. And see whether we can do something to change directions, because I'm worried.
Yeah, definitely. They're the future both of food consumption and of future food production. So I think it's really nice that we have that, have that data here and can connect sort of across the food system there. Thank you for those ideas. You know, we are obviously working with you on some of this as well. So look forward to more of that.
Yeah.
Dr. Aruna, your thoughts, you know, any final reflections, key ideas that, you know, researchers should be paying attention to in your view?
Thank you. I think Nepal is a country with the diversity, lots of diversity in food consumption, food production, and the climate and ecology, everything. We have the data show just 4 districts, but there is a very much diversity in different ecological regions, and so we need to look into that and how that diversity is impacting our agri-food system. So just just looking into 4 districts, we cannot only say it's like the whole data of the Nepal. So there's a lot that we can still do on this part.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, you know, as Avinash mentioned at the beginning, this is really a pilot effort, you know, to see if we can do it, if we can see the whole food system in context, and if we can, then is this something that we should be thinking of, you know, scaling up, not just collecting household data or just collecting production data, but really looking at an integrated food system in context. And so I hope that we can continue to collaborate with many of you to scale up the data effort itself beyond the use of this data. Zihad Bhai, last word to you. You know, maybe you can talk about the challenge of just a quick 1 minute on the challenge of scaling up such a data effort.
Yeah, Chet, you know, I mean, how much time it took and what is the economic effort behind collecting these 2 districts data from northern part of the Bangladesh. Let's say if we want to really open up the vision about the local system, agri-food system. So not even if we don't go to the district level, let's say if you want to go to the division level, it will take your economic effort at least, let's say 4 times more. You know, we have 8 divisions. We so far covered these things. So the thing is, the first challenge is the economic resources to make it local, spot by spot. So Rangpur and Rajshahi is not representing Bangladesh. Same Nalanda is not representing Bihar. It's representing the local things.
Exactly.
So that is one thing. That is one thing. The second thing is to process this huge data, you know, it requires, I mean, you are giving the access, but access with some sort of labeling and documentation of the data. So those are the main challenges. The rest of the things could depend upon the researchers and the users, how they want to use, what they want to look, because we cannot make everything available for everyone to understand. So they will do for them things. But if you really want to scale it up, it requires your time resource, human time unit resource, and the money unit resources, and also to make it in a easier way. For example, just I'm saying, I mean, I'm a bit confused when describing the samples of male data, female data. So it was saying that male is 2,000 household, 2,000 respondents data, but female is 4,000. I didn't understand that. So it requires the clarification of some sort of additional memo documentation sort of things. So this is challenge because you want to give the opportunity to people use it and collaborate with advancement. So behind that, yeah, there are challenges, but all those challenges are opportunity. Once you made it available once, you just need to update periodically in some ways, you know. So the initial investment is huge in terms of many ways. So that's the main challenge I see right at the moment.
Great, thank you so much. Actually, thank you so much to all 3 of you for your great reflections. You know, we're really grateful for all of your collaboration as well, and you know, we'll look forward to collaborating with you. Looking forward to as I mentioned again and again, I mean, this is not a definitive exercise for any of us. You know, it was a pilot. We are a multidisciplinary group of researchers on TAFSSA. We have a multidisciplinary group of partners around us, and you know, that slide that Avinash showed on the the elephant and the blind one is really key, because we realized when we started working together that all of us thought of something different when we heard the word food system. And what this integrated effort across our multidisciplinary team and the collaborators around us has shown us is that it is possible for us to see the whole system together to do research on it together, to work on papers together, and hopefully to find solutions together as well. We really invite you all to engage with the data, to read the briefs, to please give us feedback, because again, if we want to update these surveys and do more of it, we really need feedback on what you're seeing in the data, any thoughts you also have on methods. So, we invite you, I guess, at this point to be part of the collaborative around this pilot, to use the data and, also not just use the data to do analyses, but also use the data to identify entry points for food systems transformation that starts locally. So if anyone would also be interested in, taking a more action-oriented approach to using the findings that are already there, we really invite your collaboration and connections around there. So apologies for going a little bit late. Isha, I'm going to hand it right back to you to close us out. Thanks. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you, Purnima, and thank you all the presenters and the audience. You had a lot of questions. We ran out of time, so apologies for that. But we will make sure that we keep you posted. We have your email IDs because you have registered for the webinar, and we'll keep you posted on whatever are the updates on the work that we are doing with this Agrifood data systems assessment. And with that, I would just like to say that please look at your chat box. You have the link of the data set and the data notes, plus you also have a link. You also have the email address. If you want to collaborate with us, work with us, or you have queries around the data set or data notes, please feel free to write to us and we'll be more than happy to respond to them. Thank you so much. The entire webinar is recorded and we hope to upload the recording soon on the public domain so everybody who is not able to join can have access to it. With that, I would just like to inform all of you that we will be having frequent webinars this year. So this is the first webinar of the series for 2024. And with each following webinar, we will deep dive into the 5 topical areas that you heard. So production, market, diets, gender, and climate. So we will have individual webinars for discussing about these 3 thematic areas and deep diving into what the data is saying. So please stay tuned and we will be sharing the information of all the other webinars with you as well. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Taking leave.
Thank you.